about the COVID Innovation Fund, which we're going to give you the sweep of what the fund is about and a few early thoughts about the kinds of things that we're looking for. Welcome to Bradley as well. So without further ado, and sorry if you don't know me, I'm Eddie Copeland from LOTI. I'm afraid I don't think my camera works when I'm presenting, but that might be for your benefit, more of a face for radio, as they say.
We can see.
Oh, you can? Oh, in that case, I apologise, and you're stuck with me. Anyway, in that case, the COVID Innovation Fund, you may have seen the blog, you may have seen a note on Basecamp if you're part of the LOTI community, but our COVID Innovation Fund, we're putting 150,000 of LOTI cash towards measures that are supporting vulnerable Londoners who've been affected by COVID. And our aim is to use that 150,000 to go towards 2 projects in the first instance, so 75,000 each. Half the funds we're proposing go towards a project that makes or is enabled by the smarter use of data, and the other half going towards a more digitally enabled initiative. And I think important to say at this point, when we say digital, that's not sort of code for a technology project. We mean digital in its broad sense, about new ways of working, new mindsets, new operating models, new culture, not just the tech. We're also very clear that in any idea, we are most passionate about the outcomes. And so we're not going to be dogmatic about this absolutely has to be solely about data or solely about digital. We're looking for really great ideas that genuinely help the boroughs and the residents that they serve at this very difficult time. What do we need from those submitting ideas? Well, these are the criteria to take on funding. So number 1 is about those outcomes. We're here to help Londoners whose needs have grown as a result of the pandemic. Earlier last year, we had agreed with LOTI boroughs that of all the issues we could direct our resource and attention towards, supporting Londoners who've been particularly badly hit in the current circumstances is the priority. Point 2 is about using our outcomes-based methodology and working in the open. This is very much core to the way that LOTI works, making sure we're not using tech or innovation or data just in their own right, but being really, really clear about the outcomes that we're setting out to achieve. It needs to be supported and delivered by at least 2 LOTI boroughs. We're aware that there's some other organisations, some non-LOTI boroughs as well, who are interested in this fund. That's absolutely fine. We're delighted to talk to anyone interested in the fund, but it's important that they find a way to partner up with at least 2 LOTI boroughs, just to make sure that we're using our funding in support of our members. You'll be aware, or we can share it with you in just a moment on a later slide, we're sort of crowdsourcing early suggestions about project ideas, and that's a way to discover who else might be interested in particular projects, and we can help with a little bit of that matchmaking. The idea is that everything that LOTI does is replicable, ideally by all local authorities, but at the very least by other London boroughs. And so we're keen for project ideas that are in principle replicable, or at least are based on common standards where appropriate, so that they can be scaled to have the greatest possible impact. Point 5, any project outputs, ideally, the best way that we can look after them and make sure they get used is to make sure that LOTI helps disseminate them and often helps to maintain them to ensure they're up to date. If you have a look at our website, we've got a whole resources section with lots of different tools and templates and guides, and that's the kind of place where we could host details of anything created as part of these projects. People have asked us about what we mean by innovation, and again, I think our rule is relentless pragmatism on this front. To be honest, it would be innovative for good ideas to be properly scaled across London. Often that doesn't happen. So if there's a great idea that's already working and delivering great results, and the concept is how do we scale it successfully to reach more people, we're interested in that. But equally, if there's things at an earlier stage, such as they've finished their alpha stage, or there's been a discovery or some research done, the key bit we're trying to get to is that by the end of May, there's something tangible and different in the world. We don't just want projects that end up with an interesting research report. And finally, for point 8, part of the reason that we've allocated half our funding towards a data project is that over the last year, we've done a lot of work with boroughs to try and standardise the way that data is used and shared across London. And this is an opportunity to rehearse those new ways of working. And my colleague Jay will tell you more about those in just a moment. What's on offer? Well, there's funding, as I mentioned, up to 75,000 for each project, and that funding can be used to bring in external support, consultancy, research, data science, whatever sort of expert resource is needed to get the project done. We appreciate boroughs have a lot on their plate already, and the more that we can ease that collectively, we want to do that. So yeah, access to expert support. All of us, and particularly our colleague Onyeka, has got great contacts and relationships with all sorts of interesting organisations, and we're very happy to help try and connect based on the kinds of expertise and insight you might require. Hands-on support from the LOTI team, that will primarily be Genta and Jay, who are on this call, and you'll hear from in just a moment, who will look after each of those projects respectively. Personal professional development. We're really keen that when boroughs take part in a LOTI project, that the participants leave feeling much more knowledgeable and feeling like they've really gained something personally for their own career development. So we'll be trying to peer match people across boroughs. We'll certainly be trying to give you a platform, give you the LOTI platform to talk from and to share your resources from, and hopefully to actually present your findings at a future version of this show and tell. On a related point, that dissemination and design support, we can help you access the assistance to make sure that your deliverables or anything created look really, really smart, and to make sure that they reach the widest possible audience. In terms of submitting ideas, there's an online form, you'll see it at the link, and my colleague Onyeka will share that in the chat, and that's to be completed by midnight on the 1st of February. And if you want to work on a prototype, offline, you can find those same fields from the online form in the document just below. And given that our core community at LOTI is primarily through London's CIOs or Chief Digital Officers, it's really helpful if you can share with them if you've got an idea so that they can feed it back in our usual member sessions. If you're wondering who those people are on this slide, and we can share this deck with you afterwards, here's the list of contacts. So if you work in one of these boroughs and are wondering who it is you need to make aware if you're planning to put an idea, it would be the people listed here. Very finally from me, just to look at the timetable. Ideally, we were hoping that boroughs would submit at least a one-line summary of their project idea in the spreadsheet we've got there. And again, we'll share that link. To be clear, though, that's to help us try and matchmake and spot ideas and fill gaps. Please don't be put off if you can't get an idea ready as a one-liner for today. There will be further opportunity. It's just helpful. The sooner you can tell us what you're thinking of doing, the sooner that we can support you. On Monday, Jay and Genta will be holding a drop-in session at 1 o'clock. So if you've got ideas or want to know more or want to explore your idea with them, they'll be there to listen and offer advice. And then next Wednesday, we'll be sharing any early ideas that we're aware of with our core members. That's that group of CIOs and CDOs at the LOTI all-member meeting. The online form I mentioned is 1st of February, and by 12th of February, we hope to make final decisions as to which projects have been successful. And as ever, if it's a great idea, I'm sure there'll be more than we can fund, but they won't be lost. They'll go on the LOTI backlog, and as soon as we can find other ways of funding them, if there's appetite to do them, we're keen to find a way to do that. I'll pause briefly at that point and just ask anything I've said so far. Are there any questions? Please do just raise your hand if you've got something to ask. Susan.
Sorry, I might have missed it because I was faffing about with Teams. But did you say there's only one application per borough, or can there be more than one?
Can be more than one.
Okay, thank you.
I like that ambition. That's good to know already. In which case, let's move on just for a bit more detail. Let me hand over now to Jay to talk about what we're looking for in those data projects.
Really sorry. Just before we move on, we had a question from Bradley regarding the timeline for procurement. Bradley, do you want to speak up? he might be having issues with his audio. So I believe his question was, can you explain the timeline for procurement, or would you be looking at a direct award?
So for when the funding is offered, I guess we're open-minded at this stage in that there might be a whole range of different things that boroughs want to use that funding towards, and ideally we'll do a proper tender if it's at all possible to do so. In it, if it has to be a direct award and there's good reasons that are compatible with our procurement policies, we can do that. We recognise, and we've seen it with the MHCLG projects, sometimes that can have a knock-on effect on project delivery, but it would be helpful if you're thinking that procurement of a particular type of support or service is going to be absolutely imperative. Do just make a note of that in your project, and we can try and make sure that's factored into the project timelines, and maybe think about what phases we could do, for example, like completing a discovery or doing some more research before some external resource or support is brought in. You're saying thank you, so I hope that answers your question. If I haven't fully, please do add it into the chat and I'll see if I can give you a more detailed answer. Cool. In that case, over to Jay.
Hi everyone. So just quickly on the data projects. So as one of the areas that we want to fund, obviously data's in the title, but as always with LOTI projects, we want to make sure we're focusing on outcomes and not just doing something data-y for the sake of data. So make sure if you're submitting a project in this space that you have worked out who it is you're trying to help, what in the world you're trying to change, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then work backwards to see how data might help you achieve that goal. So in terms of the kind of projects we're thinking of, if you work out what that issue is, then work backwards and identify where there's a gap, where you might need additional data from another source, whether you need to do analytics on data sets to enable you to understand something better, whether you need to bring data together from multiple organizations. So start with the outcome, work backwards to the data, work out what analysis you might need to do to deliver that outcome, and then work out what you might actually need to do in practice in terms of changing the way you work or delivering service in a different way. You can follow that in more detail through our data projects methodology. So this is kind of the neat slide that takes you through that methodology and that way of thinking. And then the other part of what we want to achieve with some of these data projects that Eddie mentioned before was, if we can move into the next slide, was using some of our data collaboration measures and tools to achieve these projects. So I'll pick out a couple that are particularly, I think, important. So if we're going to be sharing data between different organisations, then we very much encourage using the London Data Store to do that. We're here to help any project to understand how to use the data store. The London Data Store team are also available to give you advice on that as well. And there's lots of great features there, including automation to upload data to and to pull data off the data store. So it is a really great way to do it, and we want to see more projects using it. There's also the steps around information governance and some of the tools there which can help speed up the process. So any data project, we would expect to consider using these tools if appropriate for the type of project, and we're also here to help kind of shape the thinking around that. So don't worry if you're not familiar with them yet, we'll help you get familiar. And finally, I've just listed a few existing data projects to just give you a bit of a flavour of some of the types of projects you might want to consider. I won't go into them. These are projects that are already out there. I'll hand over to Genta because we've only got a minute left. So yeah, over to you, Genta.
Hi everyone. So just a very brief note on what we're looking on digital project ideas. And again, not to repeat what Eddie said around our preference for truly digital, so tech plus change, plus culture, plus ways of working, a service pattern, etc. In this slide and the next, you will see just a few ideas that we've kind of come across or heard about, and very brief. You can read these afterwards and in your own time, but kind of briefly, we're looking for ideas that support local authorities, support councils to develop or set up new services to help residents. And it could be that you've set prototypes during the first response of the pandemic, and it might be a case of scaling up some of those existing services or developing further the products you created as part of that response. Another set of projects might be around improving engagement with citizens. Again, we've seen lots of different examples of this during the first wave. So again, it might be furthering those prototypes, developing them further in different ways. Another set of projects might be, or ideas might be, around testing new ways of working with staff. We've heard a lot about potential hybrid working when things go back to the new normal. So again, testing and iterating on what perhaps you've put in place might be a good place to start. In the next page, you'll see a couple more ideas around perhaps collaborative models between councils, voluntary organisations, and also collaborative models or increasing engagement with local VCS and communities to address a very, very specific COVID related need. There are two, the second and third bullet point in this list around digital inclusion. We've heard a lot of ideas around support provision, and again, we could think about how tech might enable some of those initiatives. And finally, from LOTI's experience, we've been doing a lot of work around assistive technologies. And again, here we're looking at the holistic picture of AT using assistive technologies plus a specific service or a new way of working to enable social inclusion or to reduce social isolation. And lastly, you'll see there an example we're aware of that Camden conducted during the first wave of a pandemic, which looked at building and strengthening relationships between key workers, borough key workers and residents. I think I'll leave it there and open it to everyone else for questions at this point.
Thank you, Genta. Thank you, Jay, for giving that detail. So let's just have a look at the questions. Bradley's asking, can you combine the two projects as a single project, e.g. IoT and sensor data informing assessments in adult social care? So one reaction to that, Bradley, is, again, sort of the LOTI rule of endless pragmatism, and we don't want to arbitrarily say we have to have completely separate project ideas. It's the outcomes that we're primarily interested in. And I think that just the reason, as Jay explained, is the reason we have made any distinction between two sides of the fund is just that eagerness to test in the real world some of those data sharing principles that we've worked so hard on with boroughs over the last year. If there's a project that allows us to do that and do more, then that's great. And so we'll really look at the quality of the idea itself and the outcome it's trying to achieve above and beyond anything else. Susan is asking, are there restrictions on what you can spend the money on, staff, marketing, etc.? Again, I think we want to be really open-minded about that. The one that we need to look at in more detail is on whether we can support like paying back for existing staff time. So for example, if you were looking for us to fund a person at Hackney part of their time, the normal model where that's been done before is essentially they would have to be seconded to London councils, which host LOTI. The thing we'd need assurance on there is that we can properly ring fence that person's time. We know from previous projects that London councils would just need to be able to assure that if we're paying part of salary, that person can reliably be available for a certain amount of time. So that is an option. We're happy to explore that. The alternative is if it's on sort of external project management, external sources of support to augment your capacity is a different way of doing it. But yes, we're very happy to consider a whole range of different things for your funding. Any other questions you wish to ask, either in the chat or if you'd like to raise your hand, happy to take them. If not, can I suggest do take a look at the blog title there. So yes, go to the website, and if you search for COVID Innovation Fund, you'll find all the details. But thank you very much for your interest in the fund. We hope you'll be able to join us next week for our next show and tell. Please do get in touch with the team in the meantime if you've got any questions. Thank you all.